This is your reality check.
Welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. Today is April 24th, 2021, and I'm producer Pat. We have two interesting segments for you today. We're going to throw the entire show over to the Ottawa crew. Adam does quite a deep dive on viral videos of dogs who supposedly communicate using buttons. But first, Darren gives us a second installment of his Good News in 2020 series. This time he discusses global health. Before that, though, we don't really talk about donations on the show very much. The show will always be free, but some people who can afford do donate via Patreon or the PayPal donate button on our great website, trcpodcast.com. Recently, we received some rather generous donations, so it was time to take a second and thank all of you who listen to the show and give a special thanks to those who choose to donate your hard-earned money to help keep the show running. It is really appreciated by the whole TRC crew. And with that, I'll hand things off to Darren and Adam. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy, and we will talk to you soon.
Hi, everyone. Well, in Ottawa, COVID cases are worse than they have ever been, and it certainly seems like there's a race between the COVID variants and the vaccinations, and the variants are currently winning. The year 2020 seems to be the dumpster fire that keeps on giving. But that doesn't mean nothing good happened in 2020. As the news slants one way with bad stories and the brain suffers from availability bias, we tend to think things are all bad. But this false belief can make us less likely to make things better. People get overwhelmed by notions of futility. Just like the previous segment I did on conservation, this segment will discuss some of the good news that happened in 2020 with a focus on global health. Once again, my main source is the article by FutureCrunch. Well, nothing is more top of mind in global health than COVID. And the best thing to have happened last year was the development of a vaccine. We might even start to take it for granted, right? But it really was a remarkable achievement and has already saved many, many lives. It quickly has shifted like, oh, well, you're going to get it to this. What's the rate of this versus that? Like, humanity actually created the thing. Yep. Imagine they hadn't. Oof. Like, we'd be in a lockdown like we are.
The third year of the lockdown.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so other good news. Trachoma, or granular conjunctivitis, as we all know it, is a bacterial infection of the eye and is the world's leading infectious cause of blindness. A bacterium called Chlamydia trachomatis causes trachoma. Now, trachoma has caused the visual impairment of about 1.8 million people. Wow. Of those people, 450,000 are irreversibly blind. FutureCrunch cites the World Health Organization, saying that the number of people at risk from trachoma has been reduced by 92% in the last 17 years, from 1.5 billion in 2002 to 137 million in 2020. And in 2020, it was fully eliminated in Myanmar. Next, we have FutureCrunch using BBC as a partial source, and I quote FutureCrunch saying, Africa announced this year that it is officially free from wild polio. 25 years ago, the disease still paralyzed more than 75,000 children across the continent every year. Since then, billions of oral vaccines have been provided, preventing 1.8 million cases. It's one of the greatest healthcare success stories of all time and an extraordinary human achievement. And now quoting the BBC, now the only vaccine-derived polio virus remains in Africa, with 177 cases being identified this year. This is a rare form of the virus that mutates from the oral polio vaccine and can then spread to under-immunized communities. In the domain of AIDS, there's also good news. First, the number of people dying from AIDS has fallen by about 5%, reaching the lowest level in about 30 years. Okay. Second, more than 2/3 of HIV-positive people now have access to antiretroviral treatments.
Oh, good.
Third, quoting FutureCrunch, a new antiretroviral administered as an injection 6 times a year was shown to be 89% more effective at preventing HIV in women compared to standard ARVs, which are taken as a daily pill. This is excellent news. Mm-hmm. Well, what about malaria, the cause that I happen to buy a lot of bed nets to prevent? Well, unfortunately, each year, more than 400,000 people still die of malaria, with an estimated 2/3 of deaths are among children under the age of 5. The World Health Organization released a 2020 edition of their World Malaria Report, which, quote, takes a look back at key events and milestones that helped shape the global response to the disease over the last 2 decades, a period of unprecedented success in malaria control that saw 1.5 billion cases and 7.6 million deaths averted. Malaria deaths have reached the lowest level ever recorded, a drop of almost 60% in the last 2 decades. Wow. So 1.5 billion cases averted and over 7 million deaths. Progress happens, and sometimes it's hard to see because it is the absence of something, but that is amazing. Yeah. Tuberculosis wants some attention too, as it has also been declining, albeit slowly over the past several years. The World Health Organization also published its annual report on tuberculosis, and since the year 2000, treatments have averted more than 60 million deaths.
Wow.
Whoa! I thought the 7 million from malaria was good.
Yeah.
That's like more.
Yeah.
Now, what about pneumonia? Well, it's also down in children. So is the prevalence of hepatitis B, and so is elephantiasis, which is the second leading cause of disability due to parasitic disease. In the last 20 years, there's been a 75% reduction in the number of annual infections. Great. I realize that many of the large numbers are cumulative across many years, but I thought that perspective was still important. In nearly all of these cases, at least before COVID, there was steady progress in fighting numerous diseases and saving lives. In other good news, perhaps 1 million people in the UK have quit smoking, largely in response to coronavirus, which is great for all their health.
So
outcomes.
they quit smoking because they thought that continuing to smoke would be a confounding factor if they did get the disease?
Probably put them at greater risk.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Let's
Also-
hope they don't pick it back up once they get vaccinated.
I agree with you. Although one less year of smoking, if you smoked a lot, is still beneficial.
Sure. And once, probably when you've gone a year without, your chances of going back on will be a bit lower. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Curious.
So 2 quick hits from a different source on goodnews.eu. Psilocybin was found to be 4 times more effective than antidepressants.
Wow.
New research conducted at Johns Hopkins University reiterates the power of magic mushrooms. According to the study, psilocybin can produce large reductions in depressive symptoms when administered with supportive psychotherapy. Well, imagine when the world's ready for that.
What was the name of the book we read?
How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan.
Yeah, that was
It was great.
a good one. Very
So I was like, oh, this thing might help people? Why aren't we allowing it? And I know you were thinking about this one, Adam. The Tunisian startup that's using 3D printing to create solar-powered bionic hands.
oh, cool.
Wouldn't that be great if such things were made available and functional for amputees? It also sounds so futuristic.
Yeah.
Because you're like, well, solar powered. You have to be in a very sunny region, I guess. Anyway, good for them, though. They're working on it.
Why are you walking around without your shirt on? I need the solar power, bro.
Sun's out. My bionic handguns are out. And finally, quote, new research this year showed that the risk of a person developing dementia in the United States and Europe is now 13% lower than it was in 2010. Alzheimer's is falling too, by 16% per decade. Researchers think it is down to less smoking, better cardiovascular health, and better education, end quote. So anyone who says cognitive decline is increasing, it seems that really isn't true.
So education meaning what? A more stimulated mind is less likely to suffer from these effects? Is that the idea?
I think that might be the implication, at least from a younger age.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
that could be its own segment, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that is your Good News in 2020 Global Health Edition.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's always good to have a reminder of the good things that are going on, and it's not a conspiracy by the media to give us good news. That's just the effect. That's just a feature. People consume it more if they find it shocking and extraordinary. So it's good to remind ourselves of these good things, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was reading, I'm like, wow, that's great. Wow, that's great. And you're like, world's getting worse. You're like, no, it's not. Well, it is in some ways, but not all the time. Not in every way.
Yeah. I stumbled upon an article about a dog that communicates by hitting these buttons to say words. I'd talked about similar cases in the past. Was this one any more convincing, I wondered?
I look forward to this because I intentionally didn't read about it because I knew Adam would cover it.
All right, that makes sense. Now, the article I read started with an odd statement. It says, the dogs are at least as smart as 2-year-old children. Well, my son is 2. His birthday's in December, so he's 28 months now. So he's a little more than 2, and I think some of that development is important. But I do remember what he was like when he was 2. I remember what his sister was like when she was 2, or when she turned 2. So he's not like adult smart. There's no question there, but he still impresses me every day with some of the things he does, right? He can string words together to make sentences of small phrases. He can count. He can't count very well, but he can count. He can sing. He can name things I point out. He can find them in a book. He can scribble on a paper, and there's not much of a picture. He can put on his shoes. He can ride a bike. No pedals. We can ride a bike. He can sort things, kick a ball into a net. So he's not a functional adult, a fully functional adult, but I think he's smarter than a dog in a lot of ways.
Do you remember how high a child can count at 2? Is it like 1, 2, 3? Or
He's going along with the counting that I do. So he has...
Okay. I'm wondering, is it rote memorization
Yes.
and imitation, or is it actual counting?
I believe it's memorization. I believe he understands the concepts of 1 and 2. So if I give him 1 of something, he'll say no, der, and then he wants a second one.
Yes.
So I think that he understands.
That's no two if you don't speak French,
yes,
by the way.
no two.
You're like, oh, this kid has lots of problems.
So the thing is, he does every morning. He's got a pump, right? And the pump's got like this chamber that I put on his face, and I pump it, and we count to 10. So he counts. So now he counts along.
Ah, yes.
And he gets the numbers a bit out of order sometimes. But so that's not understanding the concept of counting items, but he goes 1, 2, 3, 4, right? He can do that. So he does it better than his sister because he hears that every morning, whereas she hadn't gone through the same at her age, right?
Right.
So when I say he's smarter than a dog, I think he's smarter at human things than a dog is in a lot of ways. And I think dogs are smarter at dog things than humans are. Like a dog's better at a lot of things than I am. They can find things with their nose and all sorts of things like that, right? Now the point here, as it's been suggested, is that the dog should be able to surpass a 2-year-old in language, which I think is kind of nonsense. Humans evolved language, and it's largely what separates us from non-human animals. But this is an often repeated fact, and it even comes with specifics stating that adult dogs know more words than a 2-year-old. Do they? I'm not sure. So this claim comes with the number 165 usually. That's the number of words that they say that a dog can learn sort of in their life.
Pretty precise.
Yeah. But to be clear, we're talking about being able to understand a word, not repeat it, obviously. Dogs aren't talking.
Row, Shaggy.
until the buttons came along, right?
Oh.
So toddlers, on the other hand, they can speak 50 words by 2. And between 2 and 3, they usually use between 200 and 1,000 words. So that's a lot of words. So obviously, like, at 2 is not as good as 3. So we're kind of trying to say that a dog knows more words than a kid knows right before their language abilities really take off, right? So there's this sort of explosion point that occurs right after 2, where they go from just fumbling with a couple of words to just, like, speaking a lot. So that's kind of like saying I can walk better than a 9-month-old, which doesn't mean much, because the 9-month-old usually can't really walk. They learn to do that, give or take a month, around 1 year old, right?
Right.
So another source I saw said that a 24-month-old, that's 2 years old, child can say between 200 and 300 words. So that's more than my son was saying at 2 exactly, but still that's more than the number attributed to dogs. So absolutely, a child of 2 years old will understand a lot more words than they can say. So it's hard to compare the human child to a dog in that sense. But the idea is, yes, a dog can understand words better than a child of a certain age. Certainly, a dog's going to know more words than a 3-month-old that understands 0 words, right?
Well, and sort of what I was highlighting before is what does it mean to know or understand a word, right? Yeah. Is it the fixed action pattern stimulus response type, which maybe are what kids are also doing at a younger age, versus
yes.
understanding the broader concept of what the word means, which is a completely different thing that I think most dogs don't do at all. Yeah.
So after 2 is when the sort of next language stringing together words and things like that comes for a child. And this is why that number of 2 is thrown around, is just because at 2, that's when kids just don't have super good language skills. Like they haven't really gotten there yet, right?
Do you remember if they even have plural? Like 1 apple, 2 apples?
Well, in French, you don't pronounce the plural,
Right.
so it's harder to see, right?
It's a good nuance, though, that depending on the language you speak,
yes.
there may also be differences between the distance, lexical distance or linguistic difference between the dog and the child, because different languages function differently.
Yeah, and for those few French words where the plural is pronounced differently, that's something my daughter still struggles with and trips up on. So I don't think at 2 that understanding is there in a significant way. Now, to be fair, I have not exposed myself to many intelligent dogs in my life. So I'm told they exist somewhere. I'm more of a cat person. I've had a few dogs growing up. My parents owned a few dogs, 2 Dachshunds, a Corgi, and 2 Beagles. And I get the dogs can do tricks. I've seen it. But the dogs that I've lived with, they've not been dogs that are doing tricks or doing these amazing feats of intelligence. So no offense to... Well, Buster's the only one that's still alive, but no offense to these various dogs that I've interacted in my life. Now, I've had a lot of cats. Cats can impress me sometimes with what seems to be intelligence, but I don't think they understand a single word I say. I don't think they understand their own names, right?
Well, that's because you gave them that name, Adam. That's not the name they chose for themselves, all right?
Yeah, and I think we talked about this on the show before, right? And there's the difference between, does the cat understand and not react, or does the cat not understand because cats really seem to not care? So it's very difficult to measure.
Separating out comprehension from jerkiness.
Yeah. They're just like, I know that's my name. Why? What do you expect me to do right now? I'm fine here.
I know the word aloof.
So what's the deal here with the dogs and the buttons? So basically, a few famous influencers on social media have these dogs who speak, for lack of a better term. They have these soundboards. There's a series of buttons, and then the dog hits a button and it makes a sound, like food, outside, beach, toy, ball, whatever. They show these videos of their dogs hitting a button as proof that their dog is not only able to communicate single words, but actually put together words, kind of like my 2-year-old son does. Put together 2, 3, 4, 5 words in a string to make a phrase or a sentence or some idea.
That'd be very impressive.
Sounds very amazing. I was not terribly impressed by what I saw in some of these videos.
Ruh-roh.
So I expect that a dog should be able to associate a button with an action. Okay, I would expect that they would be able to distinguish between maybe a handful of buttons to do this. I'd be impressed if it was more than, say, 5 or 6. But these dogs have massive arrays of buttons. So one dog, Stella, she has 29 buttons.
Wow.
That's a lot of, it's a lot of buttons. I know you keep adding them, but 29 buttons. So I really get the impression that Stella has no idea what any of these buttons do. Okay? The people commenting on the Hunger for Words Instagram account run by Christina Hunger, a speech pathologist, seem to be convinced that she's a genius.
Well, okay, but you've seen this. The 29 buttons, I assume, exist because the dog uses them?
Well, yeah, she keeps adding them. So she keeps adding, she'll train the dog on a new button, and then she'll add the button. And the idea is that the dog is supposed to know where on this array of buttons the word that she's trying to communicate is, hit it, and then it goes. I remain unconvinced, okay? Is it possible? Maybe. I haven't seen it, and I'll explain some of what I've seen in these videos that does not convince me.
Okay.
So I watched a few of them. I didn't sit and watch every single one of them, but I watched some of the more popular ones. I'd look for the view count. I'd look for some recent ones and things like this. Dog hits a button. Owner does some mental gymnastics to infer that the dog means something specific with one or more words that the dog is apparently trying to say. Then the dog just kind of stands there and stares at the owner while the owner talks to the dog. So the one linked in the article, this is the one in the article that I saw as proof of how smart the dog is. So she hits the buttons saying, happy, ball, want, outside. Okay? Then Christina Hunger says, all right, you can go outside and play with your ball, right? So she's like, yes, that's what I, infer these to mean. But there's no indication, there's no other indication in the video that the dog wants the thing that those buttons are suggesting, right? And they're all more or less like this. So it's not like the dog hits outside and then goes to the door, right? Or hits the food button, goes to the dog's bowl. She seems to hit random buttons, and then she infers the meaning that may or may not match what's going on with the dog at the time, right? So one was her hitting a button that says outside, and then want outside. Then the owner just says, well, you just went outside. The owner is inferring that the dog shouldn't be going outside. So does the dog actually want to go back outside, or maybe that's just the one of the buttons she hits frequently, but it really isn't shown or demonstrated. And it's a corner button. I think the dogs all seem to hit the corner buttons more often.
Yeah, so there'll just be just independent of anything else, what is the rate of buttons being hit, right? Which ones hit more often? And then I guess you also probably thought, to what extent is this selective editing? Oh, well, these are 10 that I liked out of the 100.
Did she throw away 30 clips before she uploads this one, right?
That's sort of the file drawer problem.
So if I were going to fake it, I'm not saying she's faking it. I think she thinks that this is real. If I were going to fake it, I would put food and outside and ball on the corners. Because those are the easy ones. These are easy, obvious thoughts. And we know that these are thoughts that dogs bring up a lot because they can scratch at the bowl or scratch at the door or bring you their ball.
Well, thoughts, they have desires. I'm even more comfortable saying that. Those are desires that they have often.
whatever you want to call it. These are things that dogs attempt to communicate to us.
Or actually, how about putting food on all 4 corners? Oh, it turns out the dog wants food. The dog wants to eat all the time.
Yes. Now, there's one where she says ball. So Christina Hunger, her owner, repeats ball. And then the video ends, okay? But then you swipe and there's another video. So I don't know what the time gap is here. So in the new video, she has her basket of balls. She takes it out. She takes out a ball. The dog ignores it. She's like, oh, was it this ball? Right? She takes out another ball. She tosses the ball. Anyone who's ever seen a dog in their life knows. Goes for the ball. Right? There you go. That's what the dog asked for. The dog wanted that ball, right? This is the proof. This is the proof that we're getting in these videos.
Science, right? Man.
So I'm not convinced. Obviously, people find this very appealing, whether they're deluding themselves or what, but they think that this is real. I'm not convinced anything's going on here. It's possible, and because we don't know what we're seeing, it's possible the dog understands on some level, like when I hit this button that says ball, I get my ball.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's demonstrated, not with what we've seen. Christina Hunger has an upcoming book, How Stella Learned to Talk, and her 790,000 Instagram followers seem to find it very convincing. Now on TikTok, possibly the most mentally vacuous social media platform in the world, there's another famous talking dog.
Well, there's a cranky old person's view of a young person's happiness.
I'm old. TikTok is bizarre to me, and I don't understand.
Well, we could say the silly dances and everything else, but is science content. You're just not looking in the right places.
Nope, I'm not looking in the right places. I have not made a serious attempt to find good content on TikTok. I will admit that. So Bunny has a vast collection of buttons laid out a bit differently than Stella's, but the same basic idea. She has 6.2 million followers on TikTok.
What, Bunny is the name of the human?
Bunny is the name of the dog.
Okay, just clarifying.
Yeah, Bunny's owner, Alexis Devine, was inspired by Stella's board. So it's not a coincidence. It's a similar thing. Oh, I bet my dog could do that. Your dog can do that. So same basic idea. Dog hits some buttons. Owner infers some convoluted meaning. For example, and this is just one of the most recent videos that I checked and I stumbled upon. The owner says, "I love you, Bunny," speaking to the dog. Bunny just pushes the buttons and it says, "Yes, we stranger friend hi." Okay? Mm-hmm. So then the owner says, "Does that mean that you dog, I human?" Right? Like she's trying to find like really next level philosophical thought from her dog.
We not strangers, we friends.
Yeah. So anyway, Obviously, I don't think that level of thought is going on in the dog's mind. Another has her saying, "Dog, why?" So the dog hits dog. And why?
That's very philosophical.
And she's all stumped. She's like, "I don't know how to answer that." You don't have to answer it.
It's a deep question, bro.
I don't know how to explain why you're a dog. Like, I don't think your dog knows how to ask that question.
Or maybe you're just not listening hard enough.
I don't know. Yes, maybe I'm closed-minded. I don't know. I will admit I'm a little closed-minded about this idea.
Now, to be fair, if the dog said, "Why dog?" I think we would all agree that is a meaningful question, while "dog why" makes no sense.
Yeah, I guess. He's having problems with the order of words. So one of them, the dog hits, "Dad, love you, Dad." So love you is one button. Dad, love you, Dad. So then the video pans over to the male owner who's in the next room facing away from the dog and not paying any attention to the dog. And then he kind of turns around and says, "Oh, I love you too." You're like, anyway, the dog did not appear to be attempting to communicate with that person, right? The person wasn't anywhere close. The person wasn't in front of them or something like that. But to them, they were like, "Oh, look at this lovely, cute little exchange between my dog that can tell me that they love me," right? So I didn't watch all of Bunny's videos. I checked a few more. Those were some of the popular ones. And I didn't really get any indication that there was much else going on. So there's no real science here. Or is there?
Oh.
Well, Bunny's success convinced Federico Rossano of the Comparative Cognition Lab at UC San Diego to come up with a project to study dogs using buttons, right?
That sounds like more science.
He wanted to do real science. So they have 700 participants, which includes dogs, cats, and horses. And they set up the subjects with these boards and they record them. They record them constantly, right? So Rosanna says that he doesn't want to just see cherry-picked clips, right? So obviously a social media account is not recording all the time. So this is great. We expect only to see clips that seem convincing to end up on Instagram and TikTok, social media. Even if somehow the ones that Bunny and Stella are putting together, to me, I don't find convincing. There's still probably some triage that's going on there. But there haven't been any convincing results which are telling us that there's an actual effect yet. This is good science and it's a good idea. It's the kind of thing we should be doing, but it remains to see if this will pan out, right? So I guess we can ask ourselves, could this work? Could this work in theory, right? Is this completely implausible? It's not like we're looking at psychic ability or something like that, right? Now, I don't know the full extent of a dog's ability to grasp language. So I expect, like I said, a dog could form an association between, say, a button for food or a button for outside and the action of getting food and the action of going outside. This is a very basic sort of Pavlovian response. But that doesn't mean that they have an understanding that the button is even related to a word, right? So then it's just a button to an action. There's no doubt that dogs can recognize words when they hear them, but that doesn't mean that they can communicate language to us in any meaningful way or even understand the association between multiple words, right? So if I say go outside to a dog, do they really understand what go means and what outside means and put it together and parse it, or they just I heard outside, or I know go outside means outside, right?
Or the word walk, the word outside, the word food.
Yeah.
These might trigger behavioral responses, but sentence structure, no, probably not.
Now, humans evolved language and a general intelligence, which isn't really matched elsewhere in the animal kingdom, right? Dogs, they evolved alongside humans for tens of thousands of years. So during that time, it would make sense that their ability to comprehend simple language, probably mostly individual words or like a statement, would have evolved as they coexist with humans. There's a mechanism for this potentially happening. But that doesn't include speaking to humans, right? Dogs have not evolved speaking to us and having us understand them. Giving them the ability to use a button to communicate doesn't mean that they'll automatically have that knowledge. Giving the dog the physical attribute to generate words with, say, their vocal cords would not all of a sudden allow them to have language skills to communicate with us. So we have this need to anthropomorphize animals, right? Give them this human ability. So when you hear a meow, you hear a bark, you think like, I wish I could translate that into human words, but it doesn't mean that there's actually a language that the animals use to communicate between themselves. So for cats meowing, for example, they don't even meow to each other. They're meowing for our sake, right? It's a holdover from when they were infants. So it's like we're answering a question that doesn't even make sense, right?
You're certainly looking for something that might not be there.
Yes.
Just to clarify, when you say dogs evolved along people, so wolves existed independent, as far as we know, of humans. And then there was some sort of co-evolution in the broad sense between certain wolves and certain human tribes. Perhaps it's they came around for scraps around human settlements, and then they were of a certain distance, but they became more welcome. The wolves sort of were warning signs for other potential predators, and they got food scraps. There was some sort of beneficial relationship going on, and then over thousands of years, they became more domesticated, because the friendly ones were more likely to stick around and humans liked them more. And that's sort of the narrative that goes along with this. But yes, to have the idea that new vocal apparati would exist over 10,000 years, I think is unlikely in evolutionary time. So that makes no sense. And then also why they would suddenly get huge cognitive abilities in a relatively short period of time also doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah. So, and I think you could probably do some interesting studies to say, see if language recognition exists more in domesticated dogs versus wolves. You know, so you could do something like that. And then you could say, oh, this is an ability that was, if you see it in the wolf, then you know that's sort of just, they're using a general intelligence to understand language, versus if the dog is clearly better at it, well, it sounds like that language recognition ability may have co-evolved in the past sort of 20, 30,000 years, something like that.
Sounds like a good study.
Anyway, maybe we could ask for research to be done for that instead of the button thing, but who knows? That's different. Or if the buttons existed, if the buttons were there for 10,000 years, maybe the dogs would evolve an ability to have a better understanding of language, right? Now, dogs can actually communicate non-verbally very well, right? If a dog wants to play with their ball, they don't need to hit a button that says ball. They go get their ball. They drop it in front of you. Anyone who's had dogs sees dogs do that. They put their bone, their doll, their
what does this mean, though?
Dogs want food. They aren't subtle, right? People always know when a dog wants food. They beg for it. They go buy the food bowl. They bring the bowl. They beg for scraps, whatever. If they want to go outside, they bring the leash, or they scratch at the door, or they follow you to the door, or they whine about it or something. So this kind of simple communication makes sense, and this could feasibly be sort of ported onto a button if a dog understood that association. But anything beyond that, I don't think it's in the dog to do, because they're not trying to communicate it at all. As opposed to this idea of they want to talk to me and we just don't speak the same language, right? Can dogs communicate via a soundboard of buttons? So I don't think the examples we've seen indicate that this has been happening at all. The dogs appear to mostly be hitting buttons at random, and their owners are inferring a meaning which may not be there and cherry-picking the best clips to share on social media. The dogs may understand the significance of hitting a few of those buttons, but making an association between a button and an effect does not mean they have any meaningful understanding of the language being communicated through that button. As for the specific claim that these dogs are stringing together multiple words to make short phrases with meanings above and beyond the individual words making those up, I think it's implausible, and I don't think it's been proven. Now, my 2-year-old, on the other hand, is able to say quite a few words, string a bunch of them together to make a sentence. I don't expect he'd be any good at using this soundboard.
That's funny.
It'd be way beyond him.
Good stuff. So several thoughts. One is that owners love their dogs.
Yes.
And especially like if a dog has done something wrong, so to speak, the dog looks like it's shamed, guilty, bashful, worried about the owner. And this leads to, I believe, a belief on the part of the owner that there's a deep emotional reservoir within the dog, which then leads to the cognitions that the dog must be experiencing and have complex thoughts, when only some of that might be true. Number two, if dogs could communicate, my provisional belief is that we would already know this. There's a huge interest in whether this is true or not, and we don't quite need modern technology in the past 5-10 years to figure out if dogs could talk to humans in a way that humans would like. We would have known this already.
Sure.
Three is that the emotional tone seems to be driving so much of anything when I see people interact with dogs. And if you said the same words, angry or soft, that's what the dogs seem to react to.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Right? It's
For
not
sure.
So it's not content at all. It's tone and so on. And then fourth, as you hinted, like there's this huge inference going on, and it makes me think of the Lassie shows, which I didn't really watch much of, but like it barks a bit. You're like, what's that? Timmy's stuck down a well. So I was thinking, you could arrange some dog talking to some owner online. It's like, what's that? You saw the Snyder Cut? You thought it was better than the 2017 Whedon movie? Yeah, okay, but you don't think it fully justifies the extended Snyderverse? Oh, how deep?
I think a dog, even a dog could know that.
Wow. Snap.
No, I think it does justify the extended Snyderverse, though. But yes, okay.
You better keep that in, Pat. That is quality content. I'm not kidding.
Peace out, cuboids.
Think better, act better.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Outtakes.
Next, quoting Future Crunch, who used BBC as a partial source for their little suburb. That's funny. Let me try a third time. Next, we have... now someone's using their tab. Well, at least it all happens at the same time.
It's such a weird noise.
Yeah. The pipes are calling. Next.
Chicken neck?
That's funny.